Okay, so we're going to talk about what does the Noam Elimelech say about the menorah, and when obviously when we light our Chanukah, it's 8 branches, and the menorah is 7 branches. But what we're also doing in a certain sense, even though it's something different, because our Chanukah has 8 branches, it corresponds to the 8 nights of the miracle. It also corresponds, and this is why we colloquially call it a menorah. It corresponds to the menorah of the temple. And so what's the message of the menorah of the temple, which I think is a very important message for Hanukkah. So let's go back to this, to the verses in the Torah that talk about a menorah, which is actually the reading for the last day of Hanukkah. So it's directly connected by the rabbis to Hanukkah. This is the reading of the 8th day of Hanukkah, a special reading which is called Zos Chanukah. This is Hanukkah. The last day of Hanukkah is called Zos Chanukah, and because at the end of Parshas Naso, there is the words that we say, Zos Chanukah HaMizbeach. This is the dedication of the altar. So then, right after that Parsha of Naso, after the Chanukah HaMizbeach, the dedication of the altar, we come to the commandment to light the menorah. And the verse tells us that you shall light the menorah towards the center of the menorah. You should illuminate the 7 flames. And Aaron did this. Aaron did this towards the center of the menorah. He lifted up the candles, just like God commanded Moses. And this is the act, and this is how the menorah was made. It was miksha, zahav, and the Torah tells us how the menorah was made. And then it says, Kain asa ta menorah. This is what Moshe did for the menorah. So the strange phrase here that the Noam Elimelech, the Rebbe Elimelech, is bothered by is, why does it have to say this is how the menorah was made? It does menorah. It doesn't say this by any of the other utensils. It doesn't say this by the other utensils. This is how this was made. So it's a strange phrase, menorah. So he says something here. He connects it to a powerful idea. And I think this is what Chanukah is also about. It says that David came, it says in the Talmud and Tractate Makot, 24a, David came, that the Torah tells us in Makot, or twice actually in the Torah, we came across it, twice actually in the Talmud, we came across one recently in Masechet Nedarim, and then at the end of Makot, it states that there were 613 commandments. But David said that this is too much. This is too much. And he was able to distill all the 613 commandments of the Jewish people into 11 commandments. Try to tell somebody said, people sometimes ask me, can you tell me the 613 commandments? And I can't. It's too many. I mean, there are books, but nobody agrees on them. But so David said it's too many. David was able to distill all 613 commandments into 11 basic principles. Then, that was too many. That was too many for people still. So the prophet Isaiah came and he distilled all of these 11 principles into 7 principles, 7 basic commandments. And then came along the prophet Habakkuk and he said, it's still too much, still too much. So, and what did he do? And he divided everything into one principle. And what's the one principle? V'tzadik be'emunato yachya. A righteous person will live by his faith. You can check it out. Habakkuk, chapter 2, verse 4. Not too many of us study Habakkuk. And nevertheless, so we see from here that he was able to distill from the 613 commandments, he was able to distill it down into one principle, from 11 to 7 to 1. So what does he mean? He says at first, shemitchilat tzarich adam hanechnas ba'avodato yitbarach shemo la'asot la'atzmo siyagim ugdarim v'hanagot rabot k'dei she'naheg kishura ba'avodato. A person, when they first enter into service of God, needs to make a lot of fences and guards so that a person will act properly. And then when a person keeps growing and growing in their faith, they don't need those many limits and boundaries because they're coming closer and closer that he needed prior to that. That every time he goes up to a higher level, he's able to be more unified with his actions. And so that's what it means. This is what it means with respect to David. That David came, and what did David do? David established 11 principles. Means to say that David was able to say that I'm giving you, I was able to take all 613, and he was able to discover how he can reach that level by just following 11 basic principles. And Isaiah came and set down 7 principles. And when what this means is when a person serves in the divine realm, he's able to combine, he's able to bring all of his actions into the seven sfirot. And then came along Habakkuk, and Habakkuk was able to bring it all into one principle. And here he says something very important. He says as follows. He says, Pirish, what does it mean that Habakkuk was able to distill it all into one principle? B'tachlita avodah, the main purpose of the service, she'evokulo el ha'achdus, that everything needs to be unified. V'zeh tachlita mechuvan. So what does that mean? He says that basically the fundamental purpose of what Habakkuk did was trying to find an overarching principle to life, a unifying principle to life. And all of a sudden, I think now I know that a lot of this is very, very esoteric and probably very, very difficult for people to understand, for me to understand. But what Hasidic thought at its core is trying to do is trying to teach us an overarching a way to live our life in a way that's completely integrated. That there aren't aspects of our life that are silos, that everything, that our professional life, our family life, our spiritual life is working in harmony. And so he's going to see this in the menorah. That's what the menorah symbolizes. I don't know if we'll have time to get all into it, so I just want to say it I'll speak it out. If people have questions, I'll answer them, and then if not, we could go into it. But basically, it says in the verse that when you light the candles, all the candles are facing El Mul Pnei HaMenorah. They're all facing towards the center of the menorah. This was the menorah in the temple, that they would be facing in the same direction. All the candles would be facing in the same direction. They're working towards a common goal. So too, if you take a lot of different lights and you put them together, you're going to have one light, and yet the light will remain just as strong. This is the symbolism of the light. This is what the menorah represents. And so the menorah represents this powerful idea of trying to bring unity into our lives. In a certain sense, this is what Chanukah represents, that there were Jews who were trying to say we need to be like Hellenists. That it's not all within Judaism. But Chanukah really is about the message that everything is within the Torah, that we can live a complete life without having to say we need to go to something that's outside of the Torah. So this is what I'll read a little bit of what he's saying. So he's saying this is what Hashem says, meaning to say when you want to lift up the Torah and the commandments, which are called me'orot, then the main thing is to come to this unity. To come to the unity, how do you do that? The 7 candles shall cast light towards the face of the menorah. That means towards the root and the source of the above. Now, you might say, this is what we do with this phrase, v'zet maseh menorah. That you might think, what do we do with this phrase, v'zet maseh menorah? Kamareh asher hera bahar, meaning to say, with this holiness that was made on the mountain, and that with the spirituality from beginning to end. You might think that the menorah, which is this physical structure, this physicality, is separate from everything else. But no, the menorah is, by the way, the menorah is made from one piece and it is beaten out. The menorah represents this essence of this unity. And so that is what the menorah represents. And he writes it here. He says the menorah represents the final and the complete unity. the candles, the seven menorah of the temple, they correspond to the seven heavens. So the idea in one sentence is, to bring everything, lavi hakol, to bring everything to a source of unity, of complete unity. That is the main aspect of what the purpose of the menorah is. And I would argue that that's the main aspect, even though the Rebbe Elimelech doesn't write about Chanukah. I'd say that is the main aspect of Chanukah, is to bring unity into our lives. And what do we mean by unity? It doesn't just mean getting along with our neighbor, but of course it also means that. But it means living a life of consistency, living a life that's not siloed, where we have this totality of our lives focused from beginning to end to take us in this direction, where everything makes sense and everything is being done according to a path that will ultimately combine us with Hashem above. So that's what Rabbi Elimelech is trying to find meaning in the menorah and in the candles. So let me just pause here. I see that George has his hand up, the yellow hand up. So we'll take